Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to look at why love sometimes feels less like, butterflies and way more like outright panic. We're tackling relationship anxiety, but we're not treating it as a personality flaw or some kind of weakness. No, we're looking at it as a genuine biological mystery. We're going to decode the nervous system together and figure out exactly why our incredibly smart brains sometimes interpret pure affection as a literal threat.
I mean, think about it. Have you ever liked someone so much that instead of feeling perfectly calm and happy, you just felt intensely anxious? You wait for their text, you check your phone, you overthink every tiny delay, you stare at that scene receipt, and your heart rate is literally spiking. Suddenly, love isn't peaceful at all. It's agonizing uncertainty. It feels like you're always just one single step away from being completely forgotten.
Which brings us to Section 1, the anatomy of anxiety and relationship fears. Here's the first major clue in our scientific detective story. That intense, heart-pounding panic, it's actually not about the person you're texting. It's not about them at all. It's about something much, much older. It's about an internal fear that has been quietly operating behind the scenes of your mind for years. So the crucial point here is that this condition, what psychologists call anxious attachment style, isn't really about romantic relationships at its core. Seriously, don't let the clinical name confuse you. It is purely a nervous system adaptation. It's this deep, visceral fear of losing connection, the fear of not being enough or being replaced. And this biological mechanism gets rooted in us long, long before we ever reach adulthood or go on our very first date. Let's look at part 2. Childhood roots and the origins of fear. To truly understand this biological wiring, we need to slow down and do a little investigating. Let's look at a hypothetical child. We'll call her Mia. Mia is just a kid navigating her world, looking to her caregivers for safety and cues on how the whole world works. Mia's parents love her, right? But their behavior is totally unpredictable. Sometimes they're incredibly warm and present. Other times they're completely distant, or they just ignore her needs entirely. There is no reliable pattern, zero emotional stability. And here is the truly fascinating science. For a developing child's brain, inconsistency is actually more painful than predictable negativity. Because if something is negative but predictable, well, the brain can at least adapt to it. But with inconsistency, the brain never, ever gets to rest. And this brilliantly illustrates the foundational lesson Mia's brain absorbs. It wires her developing nervous system with a very specific survival-based rule. I don't know when love is available, so I must constantly check. She learns that love can literally disappear at any absolute moment. Her brain is adapting to survive an incredibly inconsistent environment. Moving on to Section 3, the hyperactive system and attachment in adults. Let's fast forward a bit. Mia grows up, she enters adulthood, and starts forming romantic relationships. At first, everything feels super exciting and new. But very quickly, that old biological machinery kicks right into high gear. And here is the really fascinating part. People with this attachment style don't just care more than other people. Their nervous systems are physically hyperactive. They are quite literally scanning for danger at all times. Less texting, danger. Short replies, danger. A slightly busy tone of voice, absolute danger. The brain reacts as if something absolutely vital to survival is being stripped away, even when nothing is actually wrong. Underneath all this scanning is a painful, deep-seated belief, I am not secure in love. And that creates a massive interpretation bias. On one hand, you have harmless reality, right? A partner is busy, quiet, or just needs a little space. But the anxiously attached brain twists that reality into a terrifying emotional memory. They're losing interest, they're upset with me, they're leaving me. It's not logic, it's the powerful echo of childhood inconsistency completely overriding the present moment. Now for Section 4, push-pull dynamics and the chaos cycle. Because of this constant perceived threat, love stops being a partnership and basically becomes a full-time monitoring job. And this introduces a deeply exhausting behavioral loop for anyone experiencing it. They simultaneously crave closeness, but they are utterly terrified of rejection. Let's look at how this builds into pure emotional chaos. First, they crave closeness, so they chase. That vulnerability triggers intense fear. They overthink, they panic, they desperately seek reassurance. They get a brief moment of temporary calm, and then the whole cycle repeats. Over and over, it is an exhausting, painful loop that dictates their every single move. This brings us to part 5, the reassurance trap and why it never lasts. Which leads to a highly logical question, right? If they're so afraid of losing their partner, why doesn't hearing the words, I love you, permanently fix the panic? Why doesn't reassurance just break the cycle once and for all? The answer is fascinating, but also a bit heartbreaking. Reassurance calms the symptom, but not the system. When they hear, I love you, they feel a massive rush of relief, but the doubt returns almost immediately. Why? Because their nervous system was perfectly trained for childhood inconsistency. Actual steady consistency feels entirely unfamiliar and frankly incredibly unsafe to a brain that fully expects the rug to be pulled out from under it.
Over time, this constant state of high alert severely impacts a person's self-esteem and identity. They develop these deeply damaging inner beliefs. They think they need to be completely flawless to be loved. They fear that if they show too much raw emotion, they'll be abandoned. They genuinely believe that the second they finally relax and let their guard down, they're going to lose the person they care about. So they exhaustingly perform in relationships just to secure that connection.
Because of this, behaviors that are often labeled by society as needy, too emotional, or overthinking are just wildly misunderstood. Underneath those behaviors is a profoundly human plea. Please don't leave me without explanation. It's not manipulation, guys. It is the raw, unfiltered fear of disconnection driving the wheel. Finally, Section 6, retraining systems and the healing process. So how do we fix a biological alarm system that simply won't turn off? We pivot directly to the antidote. Because listen, this isn't a life sentence. There is a scientifically grounded solution to this emotional exhaustion. Healing does not come from finding a magical, perfect partner who will never trigger you. That is a total myth. Healing comes from retraining the nervous system. It comes through experiencing consistent relationships and building real emotional safety. But crucially, it comes from internal work, learning to tolerate uncertainty and practicing the incredibly hard skill of not acting on every single fear the second it pops up. The goal isn't zero anxiety. The goal is stopping anxiety from driving the car. And this brings us to the absolute core takeaway from our explainer today. Anxious attachment is not a flaw. You are not broken. It's actually a brilliant biological adaptation. It's an incredibly smart system built by your childhood brain to survive inconsistency in love. But what once brilliantly protected you when you were small and powerless is now simply limiting you in adulthood. Healing truly begins when you can look at your own mind and realize not every delay is rejection, not every distance means loss, and not every silence is abandonment. Sometimes it's just life happening, and you are still completely safe. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. What if your anxiety isn't an enemy to defeat, but just a confused protector waiting for permission to stand down? What other amazing adaptations might your brain be hiding? Until next time, keep exploring.